You've probably seen so many people all over your For You page talking about nervous system regulation. Most of the videos out there are just giving you the hacks and the habits, but they're not explaining what nervous system regulation actually is or how it actually works. But if you're like most people in the comments of those videos, then your real question is, okay, but how? How do I regulate my nervous system? So in this video, I'm breaking down exactly how to regulate your nervous system so that the next time you see a hack trending on TikTok, you know immediately whether it's a smash or pass for you. So let's get into it. Hey, I'm Kieran Yaliswa, your coach, career strategist, and the creator of The Possibility Pattern. After 15 years of working across tech, media, and entrepreneurship, and burning out hard along the way, I now help people who are smart but stuck realign their work and lives in a way that feels grounded, strategic, and true to them. Okay, I was working with a client recently who was trying to build out her side hustle outside of her day job. But every time she sat down to work on it, she would just feel so overwhelmed and just so drained that she would end up just getting into bed and scrolling for hours. We've all been there. So we pretty quickly realized that her working on her side hustle would send her nervous system into a freeze type of response. So I was asking her if she's tried any regulating practices. And she was like, yeah, I've been trying to do some of those, like relaxing breathing exercises. And they do feel good in the moment. But afterwards, I still feel flat and heavy and I'm still just scrolling on my phone. And that's because dysregulation doesn't only show up in one way. Sometimes your system tips into too low. And this is when you're in shutdown, you're in fatigue, you're in freeze. And sometimes your system shifts too high into that restless, anxious overdrive type of state. And the mistake that I see a lot of people make is trying to use the same tools for everything, no matter how you're feeling, when in reality, both of these different states need completely different approaches, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. What happens when you shift too low and what you can do about it, and what happens when you shift too high and what you can do about that too. And the way that I explain it to my clients is to kind of think about it as like two ladders, okay? One that helps you climb up and one that helps you climb down. And I also like the ladder analogy because it reminds you that you kind of have to take things step by step. It's really difficult to go from completely flat to energized, but you can sort of ramp your way there. But if you take it rung by rung, you can sort of build your energy and build your momentum there. And same the other way around. When you're feeling really heightened, even if people are saying, calm down, it can be really hard to go from like heightened to calm straight away. And so what we want to do is to sort of, again, take it rung by rung and shift our body downwards. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to walk you through each ladder so you know exactly how both sides work. And I'm going to take you rung by rung so you know how to sort of shift yourself up and shift yourself down so that the next time that you feel stuck, not only are you going to know which ladder you're on, so are you trying to come up or are you trying to come down, and exactly how to do that, you're going to know which rung you are on and know which rung to reach for right now. And this is really important because like I talked about in my last video, the things you should know about nervous system regulation before you get started. Regulating is not just about calming down. If you are too high, then yes, you need to come down. But if you are too down, you also need to know how to come back up. It is a two-way process. And so let's talk about it. So because everyone always thinks it's about calming down, let's do the opposite. Let's start with upregulation. And upregulation is all about when you are in hypoarousal. So essentially you are under aroused and you've gone into the state of your nervous system, which is about freeze and shutting down. You can tell that you're in this state if you're feeling really sluggish, you're feeling really flat, you're feeling numb, you're finding yourself dissociating a lot, you're doom scrolling, you're sort of staring at your laptop but just can't get yourself to get started. It's that type of energy. That's your starting point. And if you think about it in this context of hypoarousal, it essentially means that you are not aroused enough, like you're not activated enough to be able to do the things that you want to. And it's because when you are in this state, then you are in what is called parasympathetic dominance, where the parasympathetic side of your nervous system is running the show, is dominating the show, and is doing so because it's in a survival mode and that it needs to conserve energy. All those things that it's trying to do to conserve energy lead to that sort of like shutdown feeling. And physiologically, your heart rate is lower, you may feel more brain foggy. This is a survival energy conservation state, which is why I talk so much about like, if this is how you're feeling, this is not laziness. When you are in this state and you are struggling to get things done, it is so easy to beat yourself up and calling yourself lazy and undisciplined and all of those kinds of things. But your body actually is in a survival state and is trying to conserve your energy to get you to survive. And so if this is how you've been feeling, then actually it's an opportunity to give yourself some grace and look at how you can upregulate, which is what we're talking about now, rather than wasting time telling yourself how lazy you are, because that's not actually going to get you anywhere. If you want a more detailed explanation of this state, I talked all about that in the explainer video about nervous system regulation. So I'm not going to go into that here. Right now, we're going to just focus on the practical, like how we get out of these states. But if you do want the deep dive behind it, then definitely check out that video. So if this is how you're feeling and you're at the bottom of the ladder and you're feeling that flat shutdown feeling, then the first rung on the ladder, like the first one that we're going to grab, is what I like to think of as awaken. And again, remember what I was saying, that you can't go from 0 to 100. So we're trying to go from sort of 0 to like 20 or 30 with awaken. Before we can get into those higher energy states, we want to sort of just like gently thaw our body. Like if you think about, we're in freeze, you're trying to defrost some meat in the fridge. You can't cook it immediately, right? It needs a little bit of time to thaw. So awaken, the first rung, is all about thawing. And the key feature of this first stage, the awakening stage, is all about sensory input. It's all about thinking sensory first, outside in. What sensory signals can we give to our body to let our body know that it's safe to sort of awaken a little bit and it's safe to thaw out a little bit? So we want to be thinking about our senses. We want to be thinking about what are we seeing, with the light. We want to be thinking about our sound. What are we hearing? What are we touching? What are we feeling? Temperature, taste, essentially re-engaging our senses. So for example, this could be, light on your eyes. It could be splashing the cold water on your face. It could be playing upbeat music. It could be gentle shaking and stretching, right? So it's all about giving our body that sensory information to wake ourselves up. And a lot of the practices actually that are related to this are going to be the same as the ones that you want to be doing first thing in the morning when you're waking up anyway, which are the things like, getting the sunlight on our eyes. This is all about sending the signals to our brain that, okay, it's time to wake up. And the reason why we go sensory first is because that shutdown that we've been feeling is being directed by our brainstem. Our body literally lowers the arousal. But sensory inputs like light and cold and sound stimulate our reticular activating system, which is our body's sort of like wake up switchboard. And we need to reactivate that and signal to that in order for our brain to sort of get those wake up signals going. So this is the first step in being able to get our body moving again. And all of these sensory signals essentially let your body know, okay, we are safe now, the threat has passed, and it is safe for us to wake up now. And this is a really helpful stage to remember because, like I said, because you can't go from 0 to 100, when you're feeling in a funk and you're feeling frozen and shut down, you may not feel like you have the energy to do something that feels like it takes a lot of energy. So starting slowly, getting some light on your eyes, giving yourself some cold exposure, hydrating, all of those things can just like help yourself to build the momentum and the energy to be able to reach for that next rung on the ladder, which I'm calling activate. And this is all about physical mobilization. Once our system has started waking up, it needs proof that it can mobilize safely. Say, for example, you're being chased and then you hide. And then afterwards, once you think that the threat has passed, you sort of are now like looking around to see, okay, can I get out of here? Can I escape? Can I run? Essentially, can I mobilize? Can I move and get to safety? So you can think about the sensory bit before you're sort of looking out for those signs. Is it safe? And then you move. And so that's why the second rung is all about movement. It's all about activating and like physically mobilizing your body. If we are in a moment where we are trying to upregulate, that means that we are heavily activated in our parasympathetic side of our nervous system. And what we're trying to do is to activate our sympathetic side of our nervous system. And movement is a really powerful way to activate our sympathetic nervous system because movement gets our sympathetic side of our nervous system going, right? Our heart rate increases, our blood is pumping faster, we're breathing faster. If we're doing higher intensity movement, then adrenaline gets released, dopamine gets released. All of these things are triggering our bodies like get up and go energy because the sympathetic side of our nervous system is all about mobilizing our energy, right? So if parasympathetic is about conserving our energy, sympathetic is about mobilizing our energy. And when we're moving, that's exactly what we're doing. We're mobilizing our energy. So being able to go from awaken to activate is a great way of, again, being able to upregulate your nervous system and begin to like mobilize some energy in your body. And from a practices perspective, some of the best ways to do this are like brisk walking, dancing, short bursts of high intensity movement. You want to be thinking like strength training, like weightlifting, running, sprinting, like just, fast activating movement is what we're thinking about here. We're not really talking about endurance. We're talking about things that are going to get your heart beating faster. And if you're doing things like breath work, you want to be doing activating, energizing breath work as opposed to like calming and grounding breath work. So just think about it like we're raising our energy. I think thinking about this from your daily routine perspective is, again, can be really helpful helpful. Naturally, our body rhythms is that we spend the first part of the day, you do your morning routine, which is the awaken stuff, and then you go into the gym and you're doing your strength training, you're doing your HIIT, you're doing your morning workout, and you're like getting all amped up, you feel good, your adrenaline, your endorphins, everything's flowing, and you come out and you're pumped and you're just like, yes, I can take on the world. That is that feeling of your energy shifted up, you have upregulated. The final rung on the ladder when it comes to upregulation and activating the sympathetic side of our nervous system is all about taking action. So like I said, the sympathetic side is all about mobilizing energy to take action. And so in the context of the kind of stuff we talk about on this channel, which is all about career and purpose and going after the things that we want in our lives, it's this final stage where we are looking at actually taking action on those things, which is why I talk so much about like doing some of that other regulation first before we're trying to take the action. And the key thing with this in our sort of context here is that we want to be focusing on purposeful action, because that is what can feel so restorative. And it can also be a bit of a flywheel to be able to, help build the momentum for us to keep on doing these kinds of things. So that is, taking action on your side hustle. It is, tackling a meaningful activity. It's doing the things that you said that you wanted to do. It's sending the email, applying for the job, creating the content, whatever that is for you. It's at this stage where we're now doing it. And the reason why this matters from a nervous system perspective, not just from the perspective of like, let's get our things done, is because energy just for energy's sake isn't the goal, right? It's about being able to translate that energy that we've mobilized into meaningful action. And when we do that, it helps to reinforce that safety into our nervous system that, okay, we can kind of anchor in the state, we can stay in the state. Otherwise, you can get a short burst of energy, for example, like your workout high, and then still have a crash back afterwards into shutdown because you haven't really anchored that state very much afterwards. But the more that you're able to hold the state by taking meaningful action, it can help to widen your window of tolerance by teaching your nervous system that this type of mobilization of energy is not just safe, but it's also rewarding and that you can do it. It's essentially like training your nervous system. The more that you're able to do that, the more you train the capacity of your nervous system. There is another major way that you can anchor this state once you've got into it, which we will talk about a little bit later on. But first, let's talk about the other ladder, which is all about how do we come down when we're too high. So we have gone into this state and overshot, and now we're on the other side. We're in the other survival mode, which is all about hyper arousal. And now we are too aroused, we are heightened, and now it's too much. Okay, so let's talk about downregulation. And this is what people are usually sort of referring to when they are talking about nervous system regulation, or they're talking about needing to regulate their nervous system, because a lot of people are in hyper arousal. And this is when you are too high. So what's happening when you are in hyper arousal is that your sympathetic side of your nervous system is overshot. It's too dominant, like it is activated in overdrive. And this means that your adrenaline is really elevated, your cortisol is really elevated, your muscles are tense, you are breathing more shallowly. Your body essentially is acting as if there's a very real threat. This is a survival mode state. And what that can feel like day to day is that you can feel really anxious, you can feel really wired but tired, you can feel really restless, you can feel like your heart is racing, you can feel like you're overthinking a lot, you're ruminating a lot. I know that when I'm feeling like this, I feel really anxious, but my body also just feels tense. Yeah, and my shoulders are up here. So the first rung on the ladder down is similar in concept to the one for if we're trying to upregulate, in the sense that it's helpful to focus on the sensory first. So again, our body uses sensory signals to be able to understand, like what's going on, like where are we at in context of our environment. And so we can use those sensory pathways to be able to tell our body that we're safe and that we can begin to come down the ladder. And I think that these are really helpful places to start because, it's really hard to be able to go from 0 to 100, 100 to 0, but also because the sensory is just a little bit easier to access when we are in these survival states. The other things which are a bit further along can feel a little bit out of reach when you are feeling so activated. And so, the sensory stuff is a little bit easier to start. And like I said, sort of build that energy, build that momentum to be able to shift into the bigger, juicier things. And that's because our nervous system's first safety signals are sensory signals. And this is when it's helpful to remember that ultimately as humans, we are animals. And it's so much easier to think about with animals that they are constantly picking up on their senses. Like what is the light around them? What's the temperature? Like what are they touching? What are they hearing? All of those things. We are the same. So things like light, sound, breath, touch, all feed into the sensory pathways of our nervous system. And we can use those sensory signals to both upregulate, like we talked about before, but also downregulate, like we're talking about now. So when we're trying to downregulate, the way that we want to use our sensory signals is to soften. Okay, so we want to soften the lights. We want to dim the lights. We want to soften the sound. We want to soften the touch. We want to soften our breathing, which means that we want to have longer exhales and just start to let our body know that it can ease off the gas pedal and it can ease off that acceleration. We're easing off, we're softening. The key to downregulation is really about stimulating our vagus nerve, and our vagus nerve loves that softening, that slow sensory signals. That is the language of our vagus nerve. Slow, soft, and sensual. And again, I find like an easy way to sort of conceptualize this for myself or remember the vibe is that when it comes to our daily rhythm, the later part of the day, so like the afternoon into evening into night, is naturally a more parasympathetic time. That is when our body naturally shifts into more parasympathetic dominance. Literally think about it like that evening time. Like you want the lights to be getting darker. The evening is a more sensual time. This is when you maybe have your candles, maybe you've got your slow jams on. It's that vibe. That is the language of the parasympathetic, is that sort of like evening vibe. I find that to be a helpful way to remember what kind of sensory signals should I be giving my body if I'm trying to downregulate, in comparison to when we're thinking about the sensory language of upregulation. That's like morning energy. That is cold shower. That is, I want to stimulate. I want to ramp up. This is all about ramping down. And in that same direction, the next rung on the downregulation ladder after the sensory stuff, it's again similar to what we talked about with upregulation, but the opposite. And this is about our physiology, right? We've gone from sensory to physiology, but this time when it comes to physiology, and by that I just mean what's happening in our body, what are we doing with our bodies, this is all about slowing down. When we were talking about upregulation, we were trying to move our body faster. This is all about moving our body slower. So we want to be slowing down everything. So slowing down our movement. From a practices perspective, this is doing some stretching, some yoga, the more relaxing type of yoga. Yin yoga is great for this. Doing some mobility, going for a nice walk, having a warm shower, doing some journaling, things that just like slow your body down. So just think about any practices that kind of equal slow in your mind. So you want to stretch your muscles, will help you to breathe deeper and longer and slower. That's going to warm the body. All of that reinforce and encourage your parasympathetic side of your nervous system to get involved. Once our senses are sort of softened from the sensory rung that we talked about, bringing that slowness into your body helps to just reassure your body that it is now safe to be able to move at this slower pace. Which is why I like to think about it in this ladder type of way, because it's all about reinforcing. It's like stacking the regulation. The sensory stuff gives your body the signal that it can start calming down, and then shifting into like, okay, what's happening in my body helps to begin to anchor that groundedness so that we don't just sort of bounce back immediately into hyperarousal. Remember, we're trying to bring ourselves on a journey. We're trying to move from one state to another. And from there, the final rung is all about restorative rest. So the comparison with the upper regulation ladder is that the sympathetic side is all about activation. And so it's about taking action. On the parasympathetic side, this is all about conserving energy and resting. And so like rest is the final level of the parasympathetic side, which is why this is sort of like the final anchor rung for downregulation. And we all know that the ultimate rest that we can have is sleep. And we all know that sleep is good for us for so many different reasons. But when it comes to downregulation, sleep is the most important thing that you can do because it is the biological anchor of downregulation. It clears your cortisol, it resets your stress hormone circuits in your brain. It helps you with processing emotions. It restores prefrontal control. And without actually anchoring into this level of rest, it can be easy to be able to, maybe calm down and relax for a few hours. Maybe you get a massage, but then within a few hours, you're back stressed again. And so this is why people say, I've rested, I've relaxed, but I don't feel rested. You need that good sleep to be able to reach that final level of like, okay, I'm systematically downregulating my body. Okay, so that is how we downregulate. And as you can see, and as I kind of explained as we went along, conceptually, it's very similar to the other one. It's just flipped the other way around. No matter where you are, it's really helpful to start sensory first because it's so much easier to access. It's outside in and usually takes a little less energy, which is why it's easier to access, but start sensory. And then we want to think physiology next. So think about, okay, how can I move my body in a way to tell my nervous system that it's safe. And so, like we said, with upregulation, this is about fast movement. With downregulation, it's about slowing down the movement. And then we want to think about the final stage, like what is the ultimate goal of this side of my nervous system? And if it's parasympathetic, it's downregulation, it's rest, it's sleep. And then if it's the other side, you're trying to upregulate, it's sympathetic, it's about activation, it's about taking meaningful action in the direction that you want. So those are the two ladders. That's how you go up if you need to and come down if you need to. But across both of these two states and these two pathways of regulation, there is one universal anchor, which is what I want to talk about now. Okay, but before we talk about that, there is one more thing that is really important when it comes to regulation. And that is that how you use these ladders of upregulation and downregulation depends on whether or not your dysregulation is acute or chronic. So maybe, for example, you're feeling really wired and anxious before a big presentation, or maybe you have an argument with your partner or a friend and you're feeling shut down. And when you're feeling like this, thinking about regulation tools or thinking about the regulation ladders is really helpful from a reactive perspective. So for example, maybe if you are feeling anxious before that big presentation, maybe all it takes is like one or two of the rungs. So maybe doing something sensory will help. That's if it's acute dysregulation. That is very different from chronic dysregulation. What you need to know about chronic dysregulation is that quick fixes is not going to cut it. And when it comes to this is more about your routines. So this is about designing your days around these upregulating or downregulating practices. So if you are chronically dysregulated, you will predominantly be in either of these two states, like being hyper aroused or hypo aroused. So you want to be thinking about how am I designing my routines to really like support upregulation or supporting downregulation. And so this is where your daily routines come in. So acute is about short-term rescue. Chronic is about routine design. And knowing that difference between the two, like where you're at and what it is that you need, can be the difference between like, oh, I'm trying a bunch of stuff that just isn't working, and oh, this actually has been really transformational for me. I know over here we talk all about career and work and stuff like that, but it is important for me to point out that if you are chronically dysregulated, a lot of the times that can come from past trauma. And so being able to work through that with professional support, for example, with a therapist or a somatic therapist or something like that, is something that is important to consider. So let's talk about the universal anchor of regulation. Whether we are trying to go up or trying to come down, it does not matter. This is the most foundational, fundamental one of all, and that is co-regulation. And I didn't leave this one to the end because it's just a nice extra. It's because it is foundational to both of them, and so we need to talk about it altogether. And the reason why is because at our absolute core, our nervous system is designed to be able to regulate with others. So humans are social animals, and so regulating with other people is one of the most powerful ways in which we can regulate. And also right now, one of the hardest ways, considering how many more people are feeling lonelier than ever and feeling more disconnected from ever, when actually what we need more than ever is that kind of connection and regulation with others. And the reason why this is because we have evolved to link safety with connection. And so we subconsciously, our nervous system is always looking out for those sort of connection cues to let us know whether we are safe or not. Things like the tone of someone's voice, eye contact, facial expression. All of these kinds of cues from other people can help us to lower our heart rate, lower our cortisol, increase our dopamine and our oxytocin, which is why it is such a powerful anchor for both things. So without those social safety signals, sometimes it can feel like you can try all of this stuff on your own to sort of upregulate or downregulate, and maybe you do get to a place where you've been able to shift up or you've been able to shift down, but it feels like it's hard to stay there. The missing piece can sometimes be that co-regulation, the social signal to let our nervous system and our body know that it is safe to stay in this place of safety, which is why I think it's helpful to think about it as an anchor. It can help us to anchor into a state and to stay in a state of safety, which means that it's easier to come back to next time, and also we can stay in it for longer. And in the previous video, I talked about how capacity and flexibility of our nervous system is really important, and this is something that we can train. This can help with that training. And while this doesn't require big things, like it doesn't, mean you have to be surrounded by friends and surrounded by people. It could just be the small things like cuddling with your pet or laughing with a friend over the phone or sending a voice note or receiving a voice note from a friend. It doesn't have to be big. I do find that in today's world, it does require some intentionality. We have to make time for it. And what I've personally found is that the more that I intentionally create space for that type of connection, not only the more regulated do I feel, but the more I'm able to stay in those those regulated states. A really simple example I think I've talked about in a video before is I started a neighborhood walking club with some friends who live not too far from me. And once a week we would get together in the middle of the week and we would go for a long walk. And the beauty of it was, no matter how stressed I was feeling earlier in the day, just that combination of like taking a walk, which helps with down regulation, but also talking it out with some friends and just being able to be in that social connection with friends and laugh with friends always just ended up making me feel so much better. And because it was something that was just there as part of the routine every single week, it was already there when I needed it. I didn't have to try and reach for it when I needed it. And I think that ultimately is the key when it comes to regulation, is how can you incorporate these practices, knowing what it is that you sort of tend to default to and therefore what type of support you generally need. So for example, for me, if I'm stressed, I tend to default into hyper arousal. And so I know that usually what it is that I need is down regulation. And so how can you be intentional about incorporating more of that stuff just into your daily routines so that you're practicing it irregularly before you even need it? So many people will wait until the moment of crisis to be trying to do it then, whereas actually all of the practice that you do before is what supports you in the moment of crisis.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so there's your map of how to regulate and some of the principles that I found you really useful in thinking about how to approach it. So awaken, activate, doing, softening, slowing, resting. And then across both of those two things, co-regulation is what really anchors and helps to lock that in. And then finally, remember that acute blips may just need like a couple of rungs in the moment, whereas chronic dysregulation, you're going to need some more consistent routines. So hopefully after all of that, it now makes sense why random hacks don't necessarily stick, because the real question isn't like, what's the tool, what's the hack, what's the practice? It's which ladder am I on, i.e. in what way am I dysregulated, and therefore what type of regulation do I need, and which rung do I need right now and feels accessible to me right now in this moment. I hope it's given you some new stuff to work with. Let me know in the comments, like, what side do you feel like you usually default to? Do you think you're stuck in hyper arousal or hypo arousal? And if you need help brainstorming things that you can try, let me know in the comments and we can do that together. And if you want to see more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe so that they come up in your feed. And before you head out, don't forget to like the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.